Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Dan, and you're watching Old Sarge Collects. So I'm going to start off this video by asking you a question. How many of you have a sports card, whether it be a baseball card or football or any other kind of sports card, that have nostalgic properties to them? How many of you have a card that instantaneously bring you back to a point in life where you have fond memories of chasing the card or finding the card? You have fond memories of getting that autograph from the player. These nostalgic cards that you think fondly of. How many of you have a card like that in your life? And if you have been wondering here lately what the hubbub is about non-sports cards and why do people collect non-sports cards, if you haven't been bitten by that non-sport card bug yet, and you're wondering what the big deal is, I'm going to try to explain it to you in this video. You see, about 2 years ago, I started collecting non-sports cards. And prior to that, I was hot and heavy into the sports cards, vintage baseball cards, and whatnot. And I still am. Far more than I am into non-sports cards. That passion for sports cards and vintage baseball cards, it is still very much there. But about 2 years ago, I got into non-sports cards. And it started off with collecting cards of George Washington. And then it exploded from there. And I started picking up cards that were really nostalgic to me. Cards that I could directly relate to. Ones that immediately brought back memories or brought back a feeling. Ones that, you know, that caused me to think about and ponder things. It's cool that you pick up Bob Feller cards. But did you ever see Bob Feller play? Did you, were you alive at the time when Bob Feller was playing? And so he was the hot and heavy card to pick up? Or did you happen to find him at a card show and you got his autograph? It's great to pick up those cards. There's some beautiful vintage cards and pre-war cards and 80s cards. But how many of them cause you to sit and think about the card and think about what memories the card brings back? It's just so difficult to do that with all sports cards. But with non-sports cards, it's very easy to do. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to be walking you through my life in non-sports cards. Some of them are sports cards, and I'll talk more about those. But primarily these cards are non-sports cards that I'm going to be literally walking you through from birth to today. And they're going to bring back memories. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start, because I'm already 3.5 minutes in here. So this first card that I have for you today is an Allen and Ginter card from, I think, 2018. And this is from the Flags of Lost Nations. Essentially, this is a card of Texas. And I was born and raised in Texas. And the next card is going to go a little bit deeper into that. So not only was I born and raised in Texas, but my ancestry goes all the way back to Stephen F. Austin's Old 300, which is prior to, Texas becoming a country. It's prior to the Alamo. And if you're unfamiliar with Stephen F. Austin and his Old 300, essentially, those were the first 300 settlers in the state of Texas. And so that's how far back I can trace my ancestry in Texas. And I am a very, very proud Texan. And over time, my family migrated to the city of Houston. And the majority of my family lives there. And because of that, I chose this 1979 sticker, this Fleer sticker of the Houston Astros, because I was pretty much raised a Houston Astro fan. Most of my family were fans of the Astros, and I was kind of indoctrinated in that fandom. So All right, as a young kid, very young, I was really into Scooby-Doo. And even when I had my ear tubes put in as a very young kid, I had a stuffed Scooby-Doo with me during the operation. So that's why I have this Scooby-Doo card. And then who doesn't remember watching Mr. Rogers as a kid? I've seen this card on a lot of different channels, and I believe we all share that memory of watching Mr. Rogers growing up. And then as a kid, I always had my G.I. Joes with me. Everywhere I went was a new battlefield. I could take my G.I. Joes with me, and whether I was at a park, whether I was at my parents' work, no matter where I was, I had my G.I. Joes there, and it was a new battlefield, and they were fighting to the death, good against evil. And so these two 1982 G.I. Joe game cards of Cobra Commander and the Commando really bring back those memories for me, and that's why they're so nostalgic to me. And now we're going to get into music, and this is primarily music of the 80s here. I was a big fan of Michael Jackson, and I even dressed up as Michael Jackson for Halloween one year. And my favorite song of his is Billie Jean. And this card right here even talks about Billie Jean. And so this card has a lot of nostalgia for me. Just brings back a lot of memories of Michael Jackson and Billie Jean. But being a Texan, you can't go anywhere in Texas without hearing a George Strait song. You can't walk into a gas station bathroom without hearing George Strait, or a barbecue joint without hearing George Strait. And so you kind of instinctively love George Strait, the king of country, when you are born and raised a Texan. So now, my grandfather, when I was, growing up, I spent some time with my grandfather, and every time that I was with him, he was listening to, some old crooner music. He was listening to Frank Sinatra primarily, or James Dean, or, just some old member of the Rat Pack. And I remember, those are fond memories for me, getting into his car, driving down the road with him, and listening to, that crooner station that he was listening to. And I carried that love of Frank Sinatra with me. I still to this day love Frank Sinatra, and still very much love his music. And so this is represented in this 1947 Turf Cigarettes rookie card of Frank Sinatra. Now, when I was a kid, I learned early on that you were either going to be a fan of Star Wars, or you're going to be a fan of Star Trek, but you couldn't be both. And I chose to get seduced by the dark side, and so I chose this 1980 Burger King card of Darth Vader to represent that. And this is the most iconic scene in the first trilogy. And so my favorite character is Darth Vader, and I really love the storyline of Star Wars and the nostalgia that it has. And so to this day, I continue with that storyline. I love every movie that they come out with. So who doesn't love Star Wars? But also, who doesn't love Indiana Jones and that story? And as a kid, I loved Indiana Jones. I loved the adventure that you got from it. I loved, Indiana Jones's style as a man, and could you emulate him as a man almost, and so just a kind of a role model in a way. Harrison Ford was, and so this card brings back a lot of memories for me as well. This is a 1981 Topps Raiders of the Lost Ark. All right, so the first cards I ever picked up were not baseball cards. They were, in fact, 1986 Topps Garbage Pail Kids. And I collected these for 2 years in 1986 and 1987 before I started picking up baseball cards. And so this just represents, my first hobby, which would have been Garbage Pail Kids. And so here's the back on that one. Now, while I was picking up Garbage Pail Kids, my mother's brother, my uncle, handed down a couple of cards to me. So I got handed down a handful of cards that he collected as a kid, ranging from 1956 all the way to 1963. And one of those cards was this Johnny Unitas, this 1960 Topps Johnny Unitas. And a couple of other cards that I had received for him. I received 3 1956 Topps cards. And so I picked up these 2 cards from him, these were handed down. But in addition to that, there was a 1956 Topps Roberto Clemente that was gifted to me. And as a young kid, I accidentally tore it in half. And so I had to redeem myself when I got back into the hobby. Anyway, so in 1988, I started collecting baseball cards, but here's the reason why. In 1988, I was introduced to Mike Morgan, and my dad had remarried, and his wife, my stepmother, was related to Mike Morgan, and my stepbrothers and I called him Uncle Mike. And so, he was somebody that once he was traded to the Dodgers, he started playing against the Astros. And so he was somebody that I would, be able to go to the Astrodome and I would be able to see play. And I really began a love of baseball at this point. So in 1988, I learned about Mike Morgan, and then I started collecting baseball cards. And so I had a pretty good, I guess you could say, modern day collection at the time of players. And then when he got traded to the Dodgers, then I really dove deep into that because I was able to see the players and meet the players. And then I was able to get their autographs on the cards that I had already been picking up. So I have him represented here in this 1988 Topps Tiffany card. And so many of you have heard stories about Mike Morgan on my videos, but that's where that started. Now, because of Mike Morgan, I also decided to start playing baseball. And so this is a sticker from 1990. This is actually me. And this is me playing on a team called the Red River Containers. And as you can see, I was number 9, my jersey number. This was in 1990. I was 11 years old. I was 4 foot 10 inches, 95 pounds, living in Garland, Texas at the time. And so this was my I guess first appearance here on in baseball, and I guess you could say my rookie card. But I started playing the game of baseball and started loving playing baseball. And as you can see here in the background, I have an autographed postcard of Mike Morgan when he was still on the Mariners. And I don't know if you can tell, but there are pinholes in the top corners from me having that tacked up onto a corkboard. And then next to it is a picture of me later in 1993 where I was playing baseball on another team, and that was the Cubs. And then in 1990, another movie came out. This movie just solidified my love of baseball and the nostalgia and the passion that people can have for baseball. And that's represented here in this 1990 card of Field of Dreams, the movie. And, even as a 45-year-old today, I can relate to Kevin Costner with the nostalgia that he felt when he saw those ghostly figures come out of the cornfields playing baseball on his homemade baseball field. So then in my junior year of high school, we moved, and when I moved, I couldn't play baseball anymore, and so I got into photography. And so this card here represents that transition in my life where I transitioned from baseball to photography. But what I started doing was I started being a school photographer, going to sports events and taking pictures for the yearbook. And then that transitioned into a job. I started working at the Palestine Herald Press in Palestine, Texas. And I was a sports photographer and, just a photojournalist for the Palestine Herald Press. And that took me pretty much all over Texas, where I was taking pictures of taking pictures of hockey games and taking pictures of baseball and football games, and mostly high school and college, but sometimes professional. And so this just brings me back to that moment. And this is a 1920s tobacco card from Will's Cigarettes, and it talks about the invention of the camera. And this set is from Famous Inventions. And then after about 6 months after high school, I joined the Army, and this card here represents me joining the Army, and this is a Belgian chocolate card. So this card is paper thin, and it's from Belgium, a chocolate company, but it's also a NATO, comes from a NATO set, and it shows all of the NATO allies and their military forces. And so this card, again, like I said, represents my joining the military, joining the Army, and really starting a career in the Army. So the first, occupation that I had in the Army was in the chaplain corps. And I was a chaplain assistant, and I spent roughly around 4 years being a chaplain assistant in the Army. This is represented on this chaplain card. This is a 1889 Kenny Tobacco card, and it's a chaplain. And so the first duty station that I had was the Army sent me back to Texas, and so I spent 2 years at Fort Hood, Texas, and that's represented here in this 1888 Allen and Ginter N11 Flags of the States and Territories card of Texas. And this is in an SGC4. Here's the back. I love this set. And for those of you who have gotten a care package from me, I've been able to send most of you a card from this set. So, and then 2 years after, after 2 years being at Fort Hood, the Army sent me to Germany, and I was stationed just outside of Frankfurt in a town called Hanau. And so this card here represents those 3 years that I spent in Hanau, and that led all the way up to 2001, just after 9/11, when I got out of the Army and I moved back to Texas, and I started going to school at Sam Houston State University in Huntsville, Texas. And so I went there from my freshman and sophomore years, and then I started a family. And so in order to take care of my family financially, I decided to join the Army again. And so this time I joined the Ordnance Corps of the Army, and that's represented here in this 1889 Kenny Tobacco card of an ordnance sergeant from 1886. And so I spent the next 7 years as an ordnance sergeant. And the first duty station that I had as an ordnance sergeant was at Fort Benning, Georgia. And so this N11 Allen and Ginter card of Georgia best represents my time living in Georgia. And while I was living there in Georgia, I got deployed to Iraq, and I spent 15 months in Iraq deployed, and that's represented here in this 1956 Topps card of the flags of the world set, representing Iraq. And then after I came home from Iraq, the Army moved me to Louisiana, and they stationed me at Fort Polk, Louisiana. And so that's represented here with this 1888 Allen and Ginter Louisiana flag card. And while I was in Louisiana, I was training people to deploy. And after 2 years, I got moved back to Germany. And this time, instead of being near Frankfurt, I was in the state of Bavaria in Germany. And I was stationed in Grafenwehr. Grafenwehr is a town pretty close to Nuremberg. And it's the same town that Elvis was stationed back in the 1950s. And so that's represented here with this Bavaria card, which is also a stalwart card of, trying to focus here, of Bavaria. And while I was there in Germany, I was deployed to Afghanistan. I was there for 9 months in the Helmand province of Afghanistan. And so that's also represented here in this 1956 Topps card of Afghanistan. And then after I came home from Afghanistan, I got transitioned to recruiting duty. And so the Army sent me to recruiting school, and then I got stationed in New Orleans, Louisiana, where I still live today. I got stationed in New Orleans, Louisiana, which is represented in this 1888 Allen and Ginter City Flags card of New Orleans. And I spent 3 years in New Orleans, and then the Army moved me to Baton Rouge, and I spent 3 years in Baton Rouge before I retired. Now, while I was in Baton Rouge, I finally graduated college, and I graduated from the University of Louisville in Kentucky. I spent a lot of time back and forth between Baton Rouge and Louisville. And so that's represented here in this Louis the Cardinal mascot card. My time in Baton Rouge, and split between Baton Rouge and Louisville, Kentucky. So then in 2017 I got divorced, and I was trying to refine myself, and so I started collecting. And I started collecting Dr. Pepper stuff because I love Dr. Pepper, and I love the history of Dr. Pepper. And so in 2017, I started collecting Dr. Pepper items, and that's represented by this 1973 Topps Wacky Pack of Dr. Popper. And so in all of 2017, I was collecting Dr. Pepper stuff, and then in 2018, I started collecting, hot and heavy, started collecting baseball cards and vintage baseball cards. And I started with this card here. My entire collection of cards, were started from this one card. And getting back into the hobby, I never had a chance as a kid to pick up any Mickey Mantle cards. And so this was my opportunity to do that. And so this card started it all. And then I retired from the Army, moved back to New Orleans, and I'm a Jeep owner. I drive a Jeep Wrangler, but I just love the Jeep line of vehicles, and so the Jeep brand. And so I have that passion of Jeeps represented here in this 1953 55 Topps World on Wheels card of Willie's Jeep, the Army Wonder Car. And so it fits perfectly into my non-sport collection, representing my love of Jeeps and love of the Army. And then finishing up, if you couldn't tell by this video, I am very patriotic and passionate about the freedoms that we have in our country. And even though I've spent a lot of years abroad, whether it be in Germany or Iraq, Afghanistan, whether it was in Bulgaria or other countries that I've spent time in deployed, like Syria and Kosovo. I just love and am very passionate about the freedoms that we have here in the United States, and my service to my country, and what our flag represents for me. And so that's full circle, basically from my ancestry to today. My life in cards. And I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you can now see what non-sports card collectors are passionate about and why we are drawn to the non-sports cards area of card collecting. And like I said, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Keep hunting the good stuff, and thanks for watching.